Carlos Valdes stars in Up Here on Hulu. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Carlos, I feel like this series is so in your wheelhouse as a television actor, as a musical theater performer, as a musician in your own right. What was it about the project, the character, the scripts that most appealed to you? Because I feel like it is just so kind of tailor-made to your strengths and talents.
Yeah, I think, you know, as an actor, oftentimes it's really just about getting in the room and trying to create life to give life to as many different kinds of stories as possible. You're always navigating different kinds of contexts and different characters. And this one just kind of felt right from the get-go, to be honest. Not only is it this beautiful musical theater piece that sort of crosses, like you were hinting at, the different sort of disciplines and worlds that I come from as a performer, but it also, there's something about the character of Miguel in this story that always really spoke to me. I think we can all relate to sort of living in our heads and having to navigate all the different pieces of the different sort of parts of ourselves that are always piping up and interjecting in different moments to provide different kinds of advice, some helpful and some incredibly not helpful. And so I definitely found myself resonating with that. And I think I think it's kind of a dream to be able to do a musical and lend life to the extravagant colors that a musical is often asking you to explore, while also at the same time giving service to all the really subtle nuances of what are happening in a person's psyche. Because I think with musicals, um, you don't often get a chance to really explore that subtlety. So that's one of the things that was so special about this show is it gave us an opportunity to really explore both sides of that, not just the macro but the micro as well.
Yeah, we'll dive into the character soon, but I do want to ask you about the musical component and the process. I have to imagine this series, even though, as you were saying, you've done work similar to it on stage, for example, I have to feel like it's so daunting to prepare 8 episodes. There's two or three numbers or sequences in each episode that you're involved with and you're prepping. What was most daunting to you about, when you actually signed on to the project and started diving into the material? Did you find it, just is it overwhelming? Is it daunting? What was it like to prepare for, the challenge ahead?
Um, it was a little bit daunting. I think it was a little less daunting for me because I was pretty familiar with what the process looks like for putting together a TV show. And I was also familiar with the process of what it is to put together a stage musical. So it was definitely it was more the cross pollination, I think, that was intimidating to me. But ultimately, I really didn't fall prey to that anxiety as much as I thought I would, just because we really had the best possible team shepherding us through the process and building the perfect sort of rehearsal structure for this kind of show. Even though, you know, doing a musical TV show is still relatively new, I really felt like uh, Tommy and Bobby and Kristen and Lev and Danielle, they all had they had the best possible approach to tackling this newish kind of hybrid. Um, Tommy, obviously he's not just coming from theater. He definitely has some experience with putting things on camera and directing stuff for that medium. So he brought a whole ton of he brought a whole heap of confidence to the process, which is like it really goes a long way, I think, when you're working with a team and assembling a team and trying to um as he says, build the plane as you learn to fly it at the same time. That confidence really goes a long way. And it definitely did for us. And so even though I had my apprehensions about how is this going to work, you're putting together so many different pieces, so many different songs, so many different numbers, and also, you know, oftentimes, with a musical, the material, it's it's more concretized. With this particular project, it really felt like it was in flux. It really felt like we were discovering it and editing and tweaking it as we went along in a way that I'm definitely not used to for a musical. So that was definitely an additional obstacle. But like I said, the team that we had behind us on this, creating that process, they brought their expertise and their confidence to it, and it made for a pretty seamless process, to be honest with you. So I was really glad about that.
I wanted to ask you, what was it that Miguel first sees in Lindsay? We see that brief moment in episode one where they're meeting at the bar. What is it that Miguel very first sees in Lindsay that really kind of draws him to her?
Um, that's a great question. I think, I always thought that Miguel's approach initially was actually driven by his attempts to accommodate to this toxic masculinity and the braggadocio that like environment that he finds himself in while he's like trying to make a living as an investment, working at an investment bank. And I think his attempts to try to fit into that world and sort of like carry himself as if he belongs in that world and like he is a part of that. I think that's ultimately what pulls that tether to Lindsay. Honestly, I think that's kind of what's funny to me about the whole thing is that he talks to her because he feels like, okay, like, the task is to get laid tonight, and that's that's gonna prove how like how valuable of a catch I am, and it's gonna be the perfect sort of like cherry on top of this like achievement at work. And so, you know, he goes in expecting to just, have a nice one night stand to kind of, flex at work the next day. But what he ends up getting, over the course of the ensuing scenes and definitely the ensuing episodes, is someone very special, someone who can see right into him, actually, who knows where his heart is, knows, where he stands, and knows that there's a soft, vulnerable interior in there, and knows how to tap into that. So, and I think that makes for a beautiful sort of shape.
That happens immediately on screen. So I wanted to ask you about working with Mae Whitman. Just the chemistry there is obviously incredible. How quickly did you find that rapport? Because it needs to come across very quickly, for the characters. So what was that process like of finding, the two characters as Carlos and May?
Um, I got the opportunity to, do a chemistry read with her back when they were still trying to figure out who to cast for Miguel, and it was like it was so obvious, when we both went in the room and we read these scenes. It just felt right, like certain actors just like understand each other's sensibilities really well, and I think we just happened to hit that right alchemy with each other. Like, she's very funny, but she's also very earnest, and I tend to share a couple of those qualities with her. And so it just felt like she got it. She understood the assignment, so to speak. And so it made it really easy. It's so rare as an actor to really get to like test with somebody and they're actually listening and they're actually like present with you and they're like ready for whatever this shape the scene is going to take. And she definitely brought that to the process. And on top of that, she's just like a consummate professional. She has been doing this since she was in the womb. A grizzled Hollywood veteran, Mae Whitman. She's I couldn't have asked for a better number one to my number two, honestly. Like, she brought so much of her expertise and so much class to the process. really. And I couldn't have asked for a better co-star, truly.
Yeah, what's so great about the series too is it's light and fun, but we also dig really deep into the characters. Like we learn parts early on and then parts later about Miguel's trauma. So I wanted to ask you, how much did you know about, what happened with his mother and kind of what happened in his childhood early on in the process? Did you know that from the beginning? And how did you kind of layer that into the performance? Because it's all really right there and beautifully comes across in the performance, but the audience doesn't learn about it until much later in the run.
Uh, I think my tendency as an actor is to lean on my spirit of self-reliance, which has oftentimes bit me in the ass. Because you want to be able to mine the script for as many clues and as much information about what's going on, and in the scenes and outside of the scenes, in this whole world. You want to be able to mine as much of that as possible and sort of construct your own infrastructure for what it is that you're portraying. Um, and I really tried to do that as much as I could. Obviously, there was a lot that wasn't on the page, um, and I tried to sort of fill in those blanks for myself. And I just I quit immediately, and I was like, okay, you guys, let's have a conversation. What's going on here? You know what I mean? And and we hashed it out. We had some like really um we had some really amazing conversations about where Miguel comes from culturally. We thought that that was a really important territory to cover and to flesh out. And you know Tommy and Lev and Danielle and Bobby and Kristen. God, I should come up with an acronym for all of them, because I feel like I gotta rattle them all off, and it's like, well, there goes 20 seconds listing them all off. Um, but the team, um, the team was so they were so ready and so prepared and so eager about making sure that we figured out where Miguel was coming from with his trauma and with his childhood, as specifically as possible. And it was such a testament to their artistry from the outset that they had question marks for a lot of these um components, and I really do think that speaks to a creator's strength, because allowing room for the undefined, the unpredictable, and creating that flexibility, especially when you're working with as many people as you are in a process like this, um, you know, that that makes you adaptable as a storyteller. And they definitely approached this project with that degree of adaptability, and so it allowed us to really work together to explore. I don't I've done projects where I feel like the thing is already written, and my job is just to come in and plug myself into the thing, and it's sacrosanct, which is fine. That works for certain creators and that works for certain media. But I think with this particular project, being able to explore it and and experiment with it and consider things and then poo-poo them and then bring them back in, you know what I mean? That made for a really integrated and authentic um filming process. And so um all of those conversations were had, and they created the best possible arena for us to have that conversation.
Let's talk about some of the experimentation, and I want to dive into a few of the sequences and musical numbers in particular. One is "I Am Not Alone," which is such a standout moment for you, for the character Miguel having this realization, which is unfortunately shot down very quickly. The kind of cruel irony at the end of the song, but take us behind the scenes of that process, putting that together. It's such a beautiful moment, and it's so fun visually. We kind of see where Miguel starts off and it kind of explodes into this galaxy and a black box space. It's so beautiful, and Sonia Taya's work is wonderful. So
Oh my
talk
God.
about putting that together.
Yeah, first of all, like someone needs to give Sonia her flowers because what she brought to this process was like incredible. Like she really committed to it in a beautiful way. And like as soon as we would step into the room and start exploring movement and what that looked like for these numbers, it was like, we weren't approaching it externally. We were coming at it from the inside, and like that's so important when telling a story like this. Um, so with I Am Not Alone, uh, I actually first heard and was first sort of exposed to the song during the audition process. I had to come in and prepare that song, and or at least a cut of it. And um and I remember, to be quite honest with you, and I don't actually think I've told Bobby and Kristen this, but like when I first heard the song, I kind of didn't get it. I was like, I'm not sure, not sure. I click with this. You know what I mean? And like, the tendency, especially with like musicals, because with musicals you're dealing with so much like pastiche and genre and like that kind of thing all the time. You kind of like, over time you kind of start looking at every song as like, you know not a gimmick, but just like, what's the catch here, kind of from an external perspective. And with that song, it took me a couple it took me a couple listens of it to really understand that the right approach to it is earnestness. That is where the sort of like the catharsis and the comedy of the song lies, is that there is like, his feelings are so big, that they're manifesting themselves in this like, insane, um like play of reality, you know so I just, I tried to bring that earnestness and that like, he takes it very seriously. It's like these are his real feelings, and I tried not to comment on it or anything like that. And I think that was the right approach. And it always felt right, to do it that way. And I'm so glad that it came together the way that it did, and that Sonia brought what she brought to it, and that those dancers, amazing performers, all of them, by the way, that they brought what they brought to it. And when we put it all together, it just like, it was like, we built the vehicle, and then all we had to do was just press the start button, and it drove itself. So
Yeah, and before I let you go, one more number I want to ask you about, and one more performer in particular. You get a great moment called "The Quest" with Norm Lewis. First, talk about working with Norm, who's just a legend and so wonderful, and also working on a piece that is so. I mean, it's such a fun concept, this kind of fantasy concept, but grappling with, for Miguel, a really kind of his childhood trauma and trying to bury his emotions. It's a very moving and important scene, but kind of couched in fantasy and fun. Just talk about, navigating that kind of dichotomy of the moment.
yeah. So uh it was, I love getting to tell stories like this, because you're dealing with, several layers of storytelling. Obviously you have this like seemingly fun and chaotic sort of video game reality that he's like, making his way through, but there's actually something very, very poignant in there. He's really just like, he's coming face to face with his trauma, essentially. And I there's something I really love about that dichotomy, about the darkness of what it is that he's confronting, but then presenting it in this very, very fun sort of video game kind of, uh with that kind of execution. So, that's the dream for an actor, is to get to tell a layered story like that, where it's not just about how I'm playing it, it's about the music, it's about the text, it's about how it's lit, it's about how it's put together in the script, it's about how it's cut together. It really is, that number, I think in particular, is a great sort of indicator of how, um, when you're putting a story together, it really is a collaborative effort. It's about what everybody puts into it.
Absolutely. Carlos Valdes, congratulations on Up Here. Thank you so much for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you so much, David Buchanan.